our speakers have prepared. And then later, we will have a chance for the rest of our participants to join in on the discussion in the breakout rooms. So once again, please abide by the hot code of conduct. So you have the link right here if you can see it. So very simply, be welcoming, be respectful, be careful in your word phrasing and tone. And when we disagree, please, please, please always try to understand why and where the person is coming from. So there. And then, of course, this webinar is hosted by the community working group. Yay! So we have our friends here who are also in the chat. So if you want to join or if you want to help us organize future webinars, please join the community working group channel. So that's at the hot Slack, so slack.hotosm.org, and look for the channel hashtag community_WG. So that's the community working group channel. And you can also join us on Telegram. So you can see the link there. All right. Open mapping _community_WG. And then you can also find more information about the community working group and our webinars on bit.ly/communitywg. So if that's clear, I would not like to take any more of your time, and I would like to pass on the microphone to our wonderful speakers for today. Oh yeah, this is a quick additional reminder. So if you'd like to follow along in another language other than English, you can use the Microsoft Translators. So just go to the link that's posted there and use the code, okay? All right, so I'll just give you a few seconds to check that out. And then I'll switch over to the next slide and introduce our moderator and our speakers for today. Okay, so I think that's easy to, the information is very easy to grab and understand, and you've probably noted that down. So, all right, this is the first part of the first block of our working group webinar. Again, it's hashtag choose to challenge sexism, misogyny in the open mapping ecosystem. So for this block, our moderator and speakers are here, as you can see on screen. So we have Leigh for our moderator, Leigh Lunas from GeoLadies Philippines. Hello. And of course, our wonderful speakers for today, we have Aishworya Shrestha from OSM Nepal and Kathmandu Living Labs. We have Laura Mugeha very actively joined us in our past webinars. So hi, Laura from OSM Kenya and Youthmappers. And of course, we have Violaine. Hello. All right, from OSM Tahiti. And sorry, I am very bad at pronouncing other things. So yes. All right. So without further ado, I would like to turn over the microphone. Sorry. Let's do the breakout rooms later. I would like to stop sharing now. All right. I'd like to have our speakers start the discussion. So Leigh, please go ahead.
Hi. Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Can you all hear me? Okay.
Yes.
All right, that's cool. Wherever you are, I hope you are safe and excited for this webinar of 2 time zones organized by a hot community working group. So in honor of International Women's Day and Women's History Month, our webinar topic today is hashtag choose to challenge sexism and misogyny in the open mapping ecosystem. So historically, women weren't recognized as map makers right away. In the age of exploration, a lot of mapping is done in ships that didn't allow women. Universities weren't accepting women until 1920s, which cut off another avenue. And lastly, women had to use their husband's or father's name to get their map published. So fast forward today, the circumstances are different. We may not have the exact same problems, but there are still gender stereotypes and biases in our field. So just like what Jika said a while ago, let's keep this webinar a safe space for all to share freely and openly regarding the topic. And at the end of the webinar, I hope everyone gets a fresh perspective and a better understanding of sexism in the geospatial field. I'm Leigh Lunas. I'm a mapper, a nature enthusiast, and I've been using OSM since 2013. I represent GeoLadies PH and OSM Philippines. I'm from Manila, but I'm based in Finland right now. Joining us today are amazing ladies from different parts of the world. Hi, ladies. Please introduce yourselves, and you could also share with us why is it important to talk about sexism and misogyny in open mapping ecosystem. So we can start with Aishworya from OSM Nepal and Kathmandu Living Labs. Aishworya.
Hi everyone. First of all, happy International Women's Month. I'm Aishworya from Nepal. I work around research and community building in OpenStreetMap at Kathmandu Living Labs. My academic background is social work, so my focus on OpenStreetMap is too on its human dimensions. Recently, we have been trying to work on this initiative called #VisibleWomen, where our aim is to put more Nepali women on the map. Today, I want to start with a story. When I was in school, we had this general assembly every day. Everyone used to gather at this huge playground that we had. After the assembly was over, we had to get in lines and return to our classes. On the way from the ground to the class, they used to be our teachers and our disciplinary in charge. They used to give us a look, make sure everything is okay, skirts long enough to cover our knees, stockings high enough to not leave a gap between the skirt and the socks. So this went on every day throughout our life. Looking back at this time, this felt like a normal everyday process, but this has lasting consequences. This normal process institutionalizes the subservience of women/girls. It asserts that it is women/girls who need to compromise on their personal choices for things to be running smoothly. The reason I'm starting with this story today is not all sexism and misogyny are blatant. Most might be innate or unconscious. This is just one out of many examples that misogyny and sexism is a pervaded issue in our culture. Similarly, there are many occurrences even today, from advertisements and songs in the media to the language we use. Sexism and misogyny are present in many normal everyday things even today. These occurrences are so common that we don't even feel that it is sexist. OpenStreetMap is subjective. Mappers map what they want to. We need to talk about sexism and misogyny in open mapping ecosystem to avoid biased data. Because many a times, although we might not know, we are shaped so much by our environment that we don't realize us being biased until we consciously reflect on ourselves. If the data is skewed, obviously the results will also be skewed. So we need to ask ourselves, are there female-centric data equally represented in OpenStreetMap? Are there women in decision-making positions? Are there women in SOTM panels? Only by asking these questions will we be able to create inclusive data. So that's why it is very important to talk about sexism and misogyny in open mapping ecosystem. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Aishworya. Next, we have Laura from OSM Kenya and Youthmappers. Hi, Laura.
Hi, Leigh. That was such a strong start, so hard to follow up. But yeah, I'm Laura Mugeha. I live and work in Kenya. I'm also Kenyan. um, my academic background is that I did geospatial engineering in university. So basically, from the start of my career as a student, I was already interested in the mapping space. But as I was continuing with school, I leaned more towards using data for good. So using data for social impact, for social good. And I guess that's how I learned about the open mapping space, the open geospatial data space. I started contributing to OpenStreetMap 5 years ago um, through an event in Nairobi. And then after that, we came together with other volunteers and started an informal OSM community in Kenya. Yeah, but other than that, I also recently started working with Youthmappers as the regional ambassador, where I just support existing chapters and also support universities to form new chapters. And those who are not familiar with mappers, they're basically OSM communities that are based in universities. And onto the first question, which where Leigh asked why it's important to discuss about sexism and misogyny in the open mapping ecosystem. I think in addition to having an entire SDG that's focused on gender inequality and its main goal is to improve the lives of women and girls, it's very important that we understand that the only issue that cuts across all the other SDGs, so health, education, urban infrastructure, and all that is gender inequality. So in as much as there are problems within those sectors, gender inequality cuts across them. So while you're talking about education, it's so hard to come up with education solutions without thinking about how women and girls are accessing this education, because it's an issue that exists. A huge population that do not have a good access to quality education are women and girls. Same applies to health, same applies to all these other issues. So for us to be able to even say in 2030 that we've achieved sustainable development, we'll have to address gender inequality. And for us to be able to say that we've not left people behind, that involves not leaving women and girls behind. And the same applies in the open mapping space, especially within the OpenStreetMap community. There's a worrying lack of diversity in so many aspects, from leadership, when you're looking at the OSMF board, community leadership, and even most importantly, data. When you're looking at the data that you're contributing to OSM, there's a huge lack of gender data, which is also important as you're creating these solutions. So I think with such discussions happening, we're able to start having meaningful conversations about these issues that are within the community, and hopefully having people listening as opposed to hearing so that we have a more inclusive community. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Laura. Next is Violaine from OSM Tahiti, and Evos Cardes. I'm not sure if that's how you pronounce it. Hi, Violaine.
Hi. Yes, it's okay the way you say it. So yeah, sorry. First want to say that I'm not an English native speaker, so I will be a bit slower than you all, I guess. So yeah, I now live in Tahiti in French Polynesia. And prior to that, I was in France in Europe. So yeah, I discovered OpenStreetMap doing a job where I needed data. So I used the OpenStreetMap data and then I moved to humanitarian mapping. And now I'm an independent worker and I work on with OpenStreetMap data and build OpenStreetMap data and try to make some inclusive projects based on OpenStreetMap data. So I love OpenStreetMap, and yeah, I moved to OpenStreetMap, I think mainly because of this openness. I actually have a land surveyor engineer degree, so prior to that, I worked on construction sites. It was not super open to women. And then, well, the job in itself didn't really interest me. So I went to mapping because of the decision-making support. I liked to support decision-making process. So I went to this field, and I still go further with open mapping because yeah, I think I didn't find my place before, and I think open mapping is by its foundation offers the place to everyone. So I think it's very, very important now. Maybe we are at the beginning and there is not so many women into OpenStreetMap, but I think the basis of OpenStreetMap are very good. And we can have some balance in gender, balance in community represented. Like last week or 2 weeks ago, it was about indigenous communities and how there's a real balance between everyone and how we don't make it a European white male project. So yeah, I really believe into OpenStreetMap, and I think I'm very lucky because I discovered it through a French OpenStreetMap community, and I really I found it very inclusive, and they had some very interesting social projects. Some guys, some men did some social projects, and they worked on non-violent communication. And it was very surprising from me because of my previous background. And I was very happy to see that this community, OpenStreetMap community, was thought thing to be inclusive, actually. But still, there is many gaps. We are not enough working on OpenStreetMap data, so the map doesn't represent us properly. And yeah, sometimes the discussions and the attitudes are not adequate to welcome everyone. So yeah, I think we need to have this discussion to make future a bit better. If we can work for it, it would be great. Is it okay?
Yes, we hear you loud and clear, Violaine. Thank you so much for everyone. So if you let us know where you're from, so you can type your name and where you're from, and you can say hello, post a question or insights that you want to share with the group. So okay, all right. So on to our discussion. So this question is for all the speakers. Could you can you share positive experiences from the field or communities where you've encountered changed behavior or practices against sexism and misogyny? You can also share some negative ones as well, just to highlight continuing issues which needs to be tackled. Does anyone want to start? I, yeah,
Shall I go first?
yeah, sure. Go ahead, Ashwarya.
So I'd like to take a middle ground on this one. There are positive experiences as well, but there are things that we really need to improve. There has been an increase in women OSM mappers in Nepal with the increase in women-centric mapping initiatives, but the efforts are not enough. Last year, among the top 10 mappers, only 2 were women in Nepal. The mapping community is still mostly male, and this means that women's needs, interests, and experiences are still not well represented on the map. Women have become a more integral part of conversations in the mapping world, particularly with discussions like these. But numbers for women in the tech industry are already very bleak, and they're even worse in open source projects. Although there's women's growing representation in organizations, but in Nepal, still all the prominent OSM-based organizations are male-led. In the current scheme of mapping, evidences show that areas like crime statistics, violent crimes, crimes against women are not prioritized in open mapping sector because there are mostly males in the decision-making positions. So me as a woman could imagine that these would be one of the most important and most useful things that will actually bring mapping to the forefront of public consciousness. So I think there have been positive changes, but we still have a long way to go. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ashwarya. What about others? Laura?
Yeah, just to add on to that, I think another example of positive experiences in terms of challenging sexism and misogyny is the inclusion of um, diversity as a check in terms of community health. I think initially when you would look at a lot of our same communities, you'd see that when assessments for if a community is healthy, it would include the number of participants, the number of edits and such things, the top 10, to be numbers based. But nowadays, I think we can see a lot of more SM communities now, including how diverse their communities are. So how many members are female, how is their leadership? And also that applies, I guess, to the global SM community as well, which I think has sparked a lot of discussion. So I think just the inclusion of that factor, factoring and thinking about how diversity is and inclusion as well in the space is great. And I think another thing that has followed up through that is now thinking of ways that communities can now be more inclusive. So communities coming together to figure out what can we do now, which actions are short term, which ones are long term. And a good example would be, I was watching the recording of a session for the Hot Summit in 2019, and there was a presentation by Youthmappers where different chapters were sharing initiatives that they've put in place to improve the diversity of their communities. And yeah, you could go and have a look at that and see how chapters in Rwanda and Ghana are doing that. So yeah, I think that for me is a positive experience. A negative experience would be, I think there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in terms of involving women and girls on all stages of the project. I think it's in locally what I've seen, there's still a lot of issues in terms of women being included in fieldwork and such things, and only being included in certain stages of a project. So I think that's something that's still existing and a negative experience from my end.
All right, thank you so much, Laura. What about you, Violaine? Yeah.
Yeah. So for me, I will start with a positive experience. Talking about the SOTM, State of the Map. I always found those conferences very inclusive, and people are always, everyone is always trying to share experience. I don't know the best word for this, but support people who do small things to show what they do, even if it's not finished or everything. But there is a very interesting support during this conference, and you can make a super network and everything. So what I really like with SOTM is the horizontality, and yeah, so it's always a big shot of energy for me going to those events, and it's very different than any other business mapping event when people are trying to sell stuff and everything. Like, it's really on the sharing and trying from my perspective and trying to move together forward. So I really love this event. And the negative note, yes. I'm sad that on the mailing list or communication channels, there is too many bad attitude. I don't know how to say it. The communication is pretty paternalistic. Yeah, I always have some surprises when I write some stuff. Sometimes if I don't give enough context of what I'm doing, people think I didn't do any research about the topic, and the discussion is totally not constructive. And yeah, sometimes there is some funny stuff because once I understand I needed to give more context, but I should not, because we are not supposed to give all the history of where we come from, why we come to ask this question now. I'm pretty sad that the first image people have, if they don't know you, but they know maybe you are a woman, maybe it counts, sadly. They will think you didn't, you know nothing, and you didn't think through the topic you are addressing. So yeah, this is a bad point for me. I think the discussion on the mailing list are not very welcoming, and you always need to construct your message so that people understand and answer at the same level to you. I'm sorry, my explanation may not be very clear, but I think there is too much anticipation, bad anticipation about women when they express themselves. What we won't find for males sometimes. So this is it. And yeah, we also had a lot of discussion about preschool mapping. And just last year in the French community, we found a solution to map preschool items. So it's kind of crazy. It's been a long discussion, like 5 years ago, at least. The topic was already on discussion, but it's a kind of topic that we don't find solution because maybe it's not such a hurry. It's so important for everyone to find how to map preschool infrastructure. So yeah, I would really love that our questions are as important as others, and that we are questioning, but we are not tourists or something like that. Sometimes I'm not super happy with the answer. Sometimes much better, but sometimes
I understand what you mean as well. Yeah, but I think I also noticed that when I started mapping in 2013, there are less women like participating in mapathons or mapping events. But now it's like in 2020, in 2021, it's like a lot of women are trying to be more open and willing to discuss their issues in their community. So that's like a very positive behavior from the women's side. And men are also accepting towards this change in the ratio of women participants. So just to keep this conversation going, so we also want to include men in this conversation. So for the speakers, what do you think men should do to challenge sexism in the geospatial field? So what do you think in what they should be doing for accommodating women and taking up more spaces in geospatial field? So anyone can chime in.
Okay, I start.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think some men already do a lot, like supporting, while proposing to do some presentation, put you forward, and sharing what you do with OpenStreetMap. I think some already do that. Maybe if more would do that, it would be awesome. Yes, I think that's a big point. And when they do that, it's not. I don't know how. Well, sometimes I think I should say a big thank you to some people, because sometimes it's just a little thing, but it can help a lot. And one day I will say a little story. I will try to explain properly. Sorry if it's not very understandable, but I hope you will get it. But yeah, one day, and it was just after my construction work on construction site, I ran a mapathon in a film, and there were a guy from the OpenStreetMap community who was hosting us, and we did this mapathon for the employee of the film. And there were some stupid jokes about how we get the money, and obviously related to my condition of woman. And this guy said, stop. He did a joke, and he totally cut the discussion this way. And I think it was the first time a man did that. So I was, wow, this space is safe. We can have a proper marathon and keep it going and normally. Because I've had so many times these weird jokes before, and it's totally killing motivation, and you don't do anything with this. So it was so cool from him to take this step, and I think it's nothing to do actually. So maybe if men and everybody that who is aware of this sexism can take a small step, it changes a lot. For me, I was okay. It's a safe space. We can do it normally, and still now I remember this, and I'm thinking, if this day I was surprised he did the correct thing. How many times I had these bad experiences? It's totally it's not possible today. We should stop that.
I remember in one of GeoLadies event in 2019, one of the participants said that men should also learn how to listen to women. So that's a way of how men in geospatial field should act when women try to speak. You should also listen. So I think one of the audience is raising his hand. Do you want to speak?
Yes, thank you. When you asked other people, also the male audience, to chime in, so I can say that there are lots of habits that we've been accumulated over the years because of the way we raised, where we were raised culturally, etc. And it's something that men use it as an excuse when being sexist. So we can make a sexist joke, we can make a sexist comment, and we can just hide behind the excuse that, okay, it was the way I raised. I mean, we've been using this phrase for 30 years, 40 years. So that sounds sexist, but it is not, in fact, because it's been used for so many times, etc. So it is very easy to hide behind those excuses. So what I can suggest, or what I should suggest for the men to fight, or to tackle these sexism issues, that we should just question our habits as well. So something that would have been okay locally, in the culture, in the place we raised maybe 20, 30 years ago, may not be okay anymore. So there is also lots of raised awareness, lots of understanding developed. So what I suggest is that, try to question your habits as well, because what you just perceive as a innocent habit might just turn out to be very sexist and very, very discriminative. So what I suggest is that just try to look at it from a different perspective. Just try to look at your habits from an outside eye, so that you may just catch lots of things that you didn't realize that were sexist. So that's what my suggestion can be.
Yeah, thank you, Can, for that. I mean, that's really like a very good thing to do. Like, examine your habit or your biases before you try to speak to a woman. So you have to examine everything first and be mindful of whatever you say and how you act accordingly. So, speakers, do you have anything to add?
I completely agree with what has been said so far, and I echo all your voices. Completely agree with all of you. I too think that all sexes, beyond male and women, everyone should be equally involved to challenge sexism, because these are not gender-specific problems. These are societal problems, and we should deal with them collectively. We need to realize this. It's not a battle of the sexes, right? It's a struggle between all of us and the power system. Like what has been already said, men should recognize and accept women's voices, even if they can't really directly relate to them. Rather than being dismissive of sexism, they should try to listen. I saw this one comment on this event. So I think Ornali had shared about this event. There was a comment, sexism and misogyny, haha, question mark. I think being dismissive comes off really badly. So I think even if you can't relate to them, at least try to hear us out, right? So that's something that people really should try to do. And like Ken said, we should examine our self behavior because we've been conditioned so much by our society every day. And we should also try to encourage others to represent themselves on the map rather than merely following the existing mapping structure, because OSM is not only for those people who are technically literate, it's also for those who don't know how to use technology. It's also for those who can't speak in English. But most of all, I think that merely being non-sexist is not enough. We need to be anti-sexist. We need to be able to speak out against sexism. Yeah, I think that's the way to go. Thank you.
Yeah, I understand. Like the battle of, it's not about the battle of the sexes. It's about everyone should have space and and there everyone should also be understanding of everyone's situation. We come from different backgrounds, so that's thank you for that, Kan and Ashwarya. That's really nice. Anything to add, Laura?
Yeah, so yeah, I think just to echo what everyone else has said, I think the main or the best way that men or males could support the cause is by being allies. I think I'm very action-based, action-oriented. So looking at the numbers at the moment and the number of OSM communities, I think a lot of times when you're talking about sexism and misogyny, people tend to look at the OSMF only, but I think all these problems are starting at the local level. I think it's easier to also talk about the OSMF because we get a chance to hear from them maybe that one time at the end of the year when you're voting, but I think there's also a need to assess things at a local level. And at the local level with all these OSM communities, most of these communities are led by males. If I'm not wrong, very few communities are led by women. So at those positions for the males who are leading OSM communities, I think a great way would be by them looking at the diversity of their community, brainstorming in their community to sort of see the ways that they can improve that. I think last year I saw some work by the OSM Philippines community who developed a community code of conduct, which I think was very great. So I think starting at the local level, because they're the ones already at those positions of leadership for these communities, helping to challenge these biases at that local level. And I think starting from that local level, you can start seeing the good effects of this at the global level with more women participating. And then I think the other way that males could also help out is by calling out sexist behavior within the communities. So whenever an issue comes up and a behavior has been displayed publicly or even privately, and someone's opens up to you, maybe as a female mapper or as a female community member, having the courage to call out such behavior, even if they're friends, if they're fellow males, and having a conversation on it and saying this is wrong, this is not correct, this could be done in a better way, as opposed to it being seen as an attack against against a certain gender. I think it totally just ties with the whole aspect of listening and listening to help out and to improve the state of things. Yeah.
Yeah. So you should always. Okay, so we have a lot of like messages from the chat that are saying, okay, this one from Haya. We should also encourage men to become active agents. That's true. So it's, I mean, it could be a bit scary for men to speak up about it, but I think it's good. Like men should also be take part of it and be active agents to support women, and never not. I mean, comment or say something not coming from a place of understanding and healing, and yeah, it's about progress and all that. Yeah, thank you everyone for that. Okay, so I have a few more questions here. Okay, and Joffrey said in Kenya, the community is led by women. That's a good example there. That's good. And I think also in the Philippines, at least in my community, there are a lot of um, women leaders and participants as well from over the years. So I'm also like proud of that. And one more question. Okay. Okay, this is okay. I want to get your opinion on this. So, the speakers, we have different backgrounds, and I'd like to know how does your local cultural context play into this discussion? This discussion meaning sexism and misogyny. So, different communities and culture are not equal in their narrative around understanding of or approach to gender equality. So in the global community, what challenges or opportunities does this present? So I'd like to hear from your thoughts from this. Does anyone want to start?
I can start us off. Yeah, so first, I think I agree that sexism and misogyny is affected by local contexts and cultural backgrounds, and I think it varies per country. Even maybe when you're looking in one country, maybe it also varies per city, if it's a rural setting or an urban setting. So yeah, all these things affect uh, the whole concept. So, for example, in more African countries, there's still gender roles still exist. There's still a lot of issues in terms of women stepping up in leadership, women taking up careers in engineering and careers that are technical. So all these things would definitely tie up and affect communities, and even how we are responding to these issues, and I guess how that affects the global community is that it's impossible to come up with like one solution for everyone, especially because in as much as the OSM community and the open mapping community is one huge community, it's actually a community of communities. So it's impossible to come up with say one solution. And I guess even I don't know how the discussions about having a community code of conduct once that process starts, it would be interesting to see how that would cover and sort of cater for all communities that exist. So that's why I think on my end, I really advocate for starting at the local level, just because we respond to things differently, and also the state of things is quite different. Sexism issues within Kenya are definitely not the same issues within the USA or within the Philippines. So I guess, yeah, it's just agreeing that that actually exists and sort of trying to work on solutions towards sexism and misogyny at a local, regional level versus global level in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Does anyone want to add? Any speakers? If,
Um, I completely agree with Laura. I'd like to build on that. I agree that cultural context is the most dominant aspect in these discussions, mostly because, as we said earlier, culture shapes our perceptions. It shapes our perception of what is okay and what is not. What are the things we think are normal, what is not? What are the things we should speak out against? And even if we are able to speak out or not, basically all the values to be condoned and characteristics to be condemned are shaped by our culture. In the context of Nepal, Nepal is still very highly patriarchal. The traditional gender roles are in full effect. In the rural areas, girls are still not sent to school. There's a very high dropout rate. There is early marriage, early pregnancy. So according to UNICEF, 37% of girls in Nepal are married before their 18th birthday, even today. Cultures are prevalent where women and girls exploitation is still a part of the norm. There are constraints of technical literacy and the internet. The gap between gender literacy rate is so high. The literacy rate for male is 78.59%, whereas that for female is 59.72%, which is a very big gap. Many people are below the poverty line, which highly affects the voluntary community or volunteer-based community of OpenStreetMap. Requirement of technical skills are, it's very hard to cover that gap. All these factors have played a huge role in the representation or lack of representation of women and girls in OSM, or even in education or technical fields in all sorts of level, all sorts of sectors that they are. However, it does provide a big opportunity. Since all these problems are out there, we don't need to go looking for problems. It's there. It's out in the open. We just need to work on it. We need to start working on it. We need to start planning on it, and we should actually start implementing the solutions to it. Thank you.
Thank you, Aishworya. Okay. All right.
So, yeah, I will also give my two cents to that. I also joined U2. Yeah, the local communities are the first door where, well, when you discover OpenStreetMap and want to dig in a little bit more, you go to the local community. So I'm not sure you go directly to the global one, well, or is very courageous, brave, I don't know. But I think the local communities are a key point for inclusion. And yeah, there is so many difference in culture. And yeah, here in Tahiti, it's also very different than in France. And we also have many gender issue, many early pregnancy, like Aishworya said before. And yeah, there's a lot of accepted fact about misogyny. Let's call it something like that. But it's, yeah, there's so many things that are cultural, and we cannot address it globally. And it needs to be addressed with a local view, as you can be totally I don't know the word in English, I'm sorry, but we have an expression in France which says you are aside from your shoes, sorry. So you are totally, the issue is here and you are here, so you don't address the issue. So yeah, the cultural point is so important, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, from my perspective, I feel very lucky to have known the French local community, because it was very inclusive, and I think, yeah, many women in different environments will not go further because, yeah, the community is not welcoming them.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, ladies, for those insights and sharing with us your experiences. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, everyone, also for keeping the discussion going and keeping the chat box alive. And yeah, so I would like to ask the speakers as for a closing question before we end our discussion. So we challenge it now, but what do you think the future of open mapping is, and what makes you hopeful? So maybe you can say one or two lines about it. That would be great. Anyone can start.
I'd like to go first. So we did this event called Visible Women, which was conducted on International Women's Day. We had invited the OSM only female OSM mappers, OSM researchers, developers, and people new to OSM. Leigh was also present. She was one of the speakers at the event. So basically, we did a poll there where we asked these women what they would like to see, or what kind of data would they like to see on OpenStreetMap. And the results were police station, washrooms, street lights, unsafe routes, risky areas, women helping organizations, women clinics, abortion clinics, risky areas to walk alone, bad vending machines, childcare centers. So basically, these areas are very less mapped in Nepal as opposed to male-centric data like bars, hotels, mechanics, workshops. So we can clearly see that OSM data in Nepal is kind of biased. But having said that, OSM is a representation of the society because people from the society are the mappers of OpenStreetMap. The social movement that is happening around women empowerment and women's right that is enforced in our society will eventually translate to OSM mappers and to OSM data. So I'm very hopeful that this will also increase in inclusivity of women in OSM in the future. Yeah. To inclusive data.
Thank you, Aishworya. Laura?
Sorry, I got lost for a minute. What was the last question?
The question was, we challenge it now, but what do you think the future of open mapping is, and what makes you hopeful?
Yeah, so I think the future of open mapping is having a very inclusive community, having a very free and open community where anyone and everyone is able to share their thoughts, their ideas, their projects freely without sort of being afraid of what feedback they'll get or what reactions they would get. And I also envision a very complete map, and I think for us to be able to ever say we have achieved completeness on OpenStreetMap is by having a very diverse community that is contributing, because with more female mappers, with even other marginalized or underrepresented genders within the community, with more communities participating, that's when we'll be able to see more features that are not there mapped. Because in as much as we continue, in as much as at the moment we only have one gender sort of being the center of the map, we only know what we know. So with more people coming up and more people being included, that's when we'll see what completeness looks like. So hopefully that's what we can see in the near future. And what I think what makes it promising is by having such discussions and seeing people concerned. And I think it's through these discussions and these conversations that we'll be able to grow and get there. Yeah.
Thank you, Laura. How about you, Violaine?
Oh yeah. Yes, I'm hopeful, of course, and yeah, I think if we have these discussions, because many people care about it, so I'm hopeful that we find a solution to ensure a better space, space where everyone can express, be heard, share his thoughts, etc., etc. And I want to answer Pete a bit about the code of conduct. I don't have very a view on that, and I would more be not super fan about a code of conduct, because I don't know how we would handle that, how we decide who decide what. And so we would lose maybe the horizontal model of OpenStreetMap. And I know that with the Wikipedia, the rules made it too closed, less freedom to new projects. Yeah. So I don't know if the code of conduct is good, but I think there is a solution. So yeah. Maybe raising awareness is a great point. Yeah, I don't know.
All right. I think after this, we're going to have breakout sessions so we can discuss more about the topic. But yeah, thank you, everyone. So thank you, HOT Community Working Group, and have a happy day. Thank you, speakers, Aishworya, Violaine, and Laura. I'm turning over the session now to Jika.
Hello. All right. Thank you so much. This was such a great panel. It was a great discussion. I would like to thank everyone once again for sharing your experiences, for being very transparent, generous, and sharing the details of the issues that you experience in your own local context and in the OSM community in general. And of course, I would like to thank you all. We would like to thank you all for sharing your hopes and inspiring us and ensuring, I guess, in a way, inspiring us to keep the discussion about sexism going on so we can act on it. And thank you also for the people who asked questions. I hope that something really gets to be done in the future. It's good that we keep these discussions ongoing. So, having said that, I would, before we go to the breakout rooms, and in relation to keeping the discussions ongoing, I would like to invite everyone to please join the community working groups. So I'll be posting the link in the chat. All right. And another thing, we will also have our, what do you call this? Feedback for this webinar. So if you are still here, if you haven't left yet, I know other people have webinars to attend to, and that's fine. But we will be having a breakup session, and we will also be having a feedback form of sorts so that we know how to improve our planning for future webinars. And of course, again, please join there. We just posted the links in the chat, so you can check that out. So the community working group details are in the chat, and also the feedback form was posted by Ms. Arnalee. Thank you so much for doing that. And what else? So I guess without further ado, I would now like to invite our tech angel, Ben, to please invite everyone to proceed to the breakout rooms. So thank you so much for attending the main session.